Material and Resources, Section LEED version 3, 2009, Building Design and Construction. GreenSpec is a really important resource to know about and something that you can reference as we go through these sections. Here's a list of the prerequisite and credits associated. This chart starts to show the prerequisite and various credits associated with this category. There are 14 total points for new construction, 13 for schools, 13 for core and shell projects. We're going to look at each one of these credits. Here's a continuation of that list of credits. The most important thing to understand is how you calculate these credits. That's the most complicated part of applying the material and resource credits. These credits pertain to CSI, spec divisions 3 through 10, and parts of 2 pertain to site. Mechanical, electrical, and plumbing are not included. And furniture is optional, but if you include it in one credit calculation, you have to include furniture costs in all of the credits, which is important to take into consideration. So as you move across the columns, you see the different metrics to calculate the totals for these materials. For MR Credit 1, Building Reuse, it's based on area, material takeoffs in an existing building. For MR Credit 2, Construction Waste Management, it's based on weight or volume, and it's something you want to establish early on with your waste hauler. And it does include demolition and construction waste. So things like prefabrication and how you plan to construct your building comes into play. MR Credit 3 through 7 are all based on material cost. For MR Credit 3, material reuse, salvage material, can be paid based on replacement value, so you're not punished for finding a good deal in maybe reused building supply store. Like in Portland, we have the Rebuilding Center, or even something like Habitat for Humanity. For MR Credit 7, certified wood, it's based on cost of FSC certified wood as a percent of the total wood cost. 4 through 6 are all the same, based on cost of qualified materials as a percent of overall material costs for those applicable CSI divisions 3 through 10 and part of 2. Or if you're using the newer specs, it's divisions 31, 32. MR Prerequisite 1, storage and collection of recyclables is required for new construction schools and core and shell. The requirement is to provide an easily accessible recycling area that serves the whole building and provide instructions to the occupants so they know how to use the recycling area. At a minimum, you need to memorize this list. You need to recycle glass, paper, metal, plastic, and cardboard. The image on the right shows you a chute on an upper floor, and the recycling area goes down to in the parking garage area down below. And the third image is actually in Europe, where they have kind of a Jetson-like vacuum system that sucks the recycling into a central repository. Once again, it's all about convenience to change a culture and get people to make these decisions. Next slide. Here's an example of a school activity where they actually were building different structures and making art projects with the recycled cardboard. It's kind of like an elementary school Burning Man of sorts, and it got the kids really involved. Something they won't forget as they go through the years and maybe bring these habits into their workplace someday in their homes. And for adults, places of occupation, you want to address recycling with tenant guidelines. And in schools, you want to run a student or occupant recycling team that can provide opportunities for learning. This can also happen in a corporate environment with a green team. There's cost savings associated with recycling, with reduced landfill disposal costs or tipping fees. The environmental benefit is apparent, and the numbers are pretty staggering when you look at them. Recycling 1 ton of paper prevents the processing of 17 trees and saves 3 cubic yards of landfill space as one example. We just don't have enough space to keep doing things the way we currently are. The first credit in the material and resource section is building reuse. Maintain existing walls, floors, and roof. For new construction, there's 1 to 3 points available. Schools 1 to 2. In core and shell, this is even more important because you could be doing a major retrofit of existing buildings. So there's 1 to 5 points available. The image shows a great example of an older historic building with new construction integrated with it, keeping the old facade. To earn these points for new construction, 55% of building reuse earns you 1 point, 75% earns you 2 points, and 95% building reuse earns you 3 points. For schools, building reuse, 75% gets you 1 point, 95% gets you 2 points. So it's more stringent, higher threshold to meet because there's a lot of existing schools that need to be majorly renovated. For core and shell, there's more points available. Building reuse, 25% gets you 1 point, 33% gets you 2 points, 42% gets you 3 points, 50% gets you 4 points, 75% gets you 5 points, and finally, reusing 95% of the main building components can get you exemplary performance point as well. So 6 points total. So this makes it the third most heavily weighted credit for core and shell projects. MR credit 1.2. It's also pertaining to building reuse and maintaining interior non-structural elements. 1 point available for new construction in schools. It's not applicable to core and shell since you're not working with the interior elements as much. So you must reuse 50% of interior non-structural building elements, including interior walls, doors, floor coverings, and ceiling systems. So for an overview, MR credit 1.1, building reuse pertains to structural components. This includes floor structure, roof structure, framing, exterior structural skin. For MR credit 1.2, building reuse non-structural, this includes walls and partitions, doors, ceilings, floor coverings, and may include use in addition, so you can move those items into different parts if you're doing a major renovation. Excluded materials are windows. It doesn't mean you shouldn't replace single pane windows that let heat escape from the building or cold air in, but this would actually help with optimizing energy performance points. So it doesn't mean it's not a good idea, you just don't get credit for here in this particular credit. Mechanical, electrical, and plumbing is excluded. Hazardous material, you don't get points for it, but once again, it's a good idea. It's just an expectation that you would deal with that in a way that applies to code. And specialty and elevator equipment is not included. It's similar to why mechanical, electrical, and plumbing is not included. It just skews the results since it's based on costs, and those are very costly items. Also, this credit is not applicable to a building addition that is more than 2 times the square footage of the existing building. And that's because the new building components coming in on the project outweigh what you're actually salvaging in terms of building reuse. Building reuse calculations are based on surface area. So you really want to prepare a spreadsheet. We have a tracking software that we built at EcoReal to help expedite this process. It's important to come up with something that makes sense for you and customize if you don't already have a tool. So you need to quantify each element, listing existing and retained area. The area measurements are made in the same way as preparing a bid for construction, like takeoff drawings. So floors and roof, it's your square footage. Exterior walls, you calculate the exterior wall surface area only and subtract window and exterior door area. Interior walls, you need to calculate the surface area of both sides. Interior doors, one side only. Casework, it's your visible surface area. And interior items that have been saved but relocated may also be included. Reusing building materials has good economic sense. Here's a case study from Southern California Gas Company, who reused an existing building for its energy resource center. The estimated savings of approximately $3.2 million based on first cost for a 44,000 square foot building came from reusing 87% of the masonry, 70% of the carpentry, 57% of the site work, and 49% of the concrete. And remember, you can use these in different ways. If you're demoing concrete, you can crush it and reuse it for backfill, for example. MR Credit 2, Construction Waste Management. There's 1 to 2 points available for new construction, schools, and core and shell projects. And the intent is to divert construction and demolition debris from disposal in landfills and incinerators. You need to redirect recyclable resources back to the manufacturing process, or redirect reusable materials to appropriate sites. The third option is to salvage the material. This could include donating to causes such as Habitat for Humanity or other similar organizations. The requirements to earn this credit include developing and implementing a construction waste management plan. This needs to be done with a construction team, but the design team also needs to collaborate to come up with strategies on how this is done, good site planning of how you're going to hopefully avoid harming any natural habitat you're trying to preserve. So integrated design is always important right from pre-design. You need to designate what materials are being diverted. Find out from your waste hauler if you need to sort the materials on site or if they could be commingled, meaning combining everything together. You need to recycle and or salvage non-hazardous construction and demo debris. And excavated soil and land clearing debris do not contribute to this credit. Those are important subtleties to memorize for the exam. This will help you answer the trickier questions. To earn 1 point for this credit, you have to recycle or salvage 50% construction waste. 75% earns you 2 points, or there's an exemplary performance innovation design point available for 95% construction waste recycled or salvaged. So the total percentage represents the amount diverted through recycling or salvaging divided by total waste generated. So you need to keep track of all receipts of everything that has gone to a landfill or been recycled. You need to convert all materials to either weight or volume and keep the calculation consistent throughout. Once again, tracking is critical for these material and resource credits. So make sure you have a spreadsheet and everything's organized, and you keep track as you go along to make sure that you're meeting those goals. There are conversion factors within the reference manual that can be used as well. Crush, reuse existing concrete, masonry, or asphalt on site should be calculated in the weight as well. So salvaging could be included on your own project. You want to keep a summary log of all construction waste generated, including a general description of each type and category of the waste, location of receiving agent, recycler, landfill, or waste hauler, the quantity of waste diverted in tons or cubic yards. Once again, keep it consistent to ease this calculation tracking process. It is important to collect verification records and make sure the contractor understands their role and responsibilities to earn this credit. Because if it's done but not tracked, according to the lead reviewers, it never happened. So you need to have your waste haul receipts, waste management reports, and keep all in a spreadsheet for ease of credit template upload later to Lead Online. The contractor also needs to communicate requirements to the subs. These lead requirements and sustainability initiatives should be talked about in meetings such as safety meetings, not something that's isolated at the end of a process. It really needs to be done throughout the design and construction process, and this is a good example of why that's so important. The construction waste management plan needs to include diversion goals, relevant construction debris and materials to be diverted, protocols, and responsible parties. Strategies include adopting a construction waste management plan, recycling cardboard, metal, brick, acoustical tile, concrete, plastic, and glass. These images you see a bin designated for wood only. If you're not commingling, sometimes that can help for actually donating the materials. Designate specific areas for segregated or commingled collection of recyclables. You also see a metals only pile. And you want to make sure you're coordinating with recycling haulers how this needs to be done to divert as much as possible. Remember, the diversion may include donation materials to charitable organizations and salvage of materials on site. Once again, that can be a cost saver. Portland's Rebuilding Center is a great example of where to salvage materials. It diverts 8 tons of reusable building materials from landfills each day, almost 6 million pounds annually. So if you took all the tubs, windows, lights, cabinets, doors, and everything else that passes through the stores, the Rebuilding Center in 1 year, and lined it up end to end, it would encircle the base of Mount Hood 3 times. If you haven't seen Mount Hood, it's a good sized mountain. It's pretty impressive what they do. And so you can either just purchase the deconstructive materials, such as the siding in that image, or they actually have repurposed furniture where they've actually used the salvaged material to create something like the mirror in that photo. It's great for home projects as well. Here's an example of a bench. MR Credit 3, Material Reuse. 1 to 2 points available for new construction in schools, and 1 point available for core and shell. The intent is to use salvage, refurbish, or reuse materials based on the percentage thresholds in the table. See a synergy with MR Credit 2, Construction Waste Management. It's based on costs of the total value of materials, as we discussed in the beginning of this section. And as we mentioned in the beginning, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing are not included, as well as specialty items such as elevators. Furniture, CSI Division 12 in the specs, is excluded unless it is consistently included in the total material cost calculation. So you want to make sure if you're including it, there's a reason, such as you're paying attention to using recycled material or salvage material, rapidly renewable in your furniture specifications, and that you're actually picking those things. Sometimes that can be up to the tenants and not in your control. Reused material for 5% gets you 1 point. That's 5% of your total material budget based on costs. 10% gets you 2 points. And there is an Innovation Design Exemplary point available for 15% of your total material costs being from salvage materials. For off-site materials, any material that has been previously used qualifies as reused material. And there are 2 major groups for on-site reused materials. There's fixed items that must no longer be able to serve their original function and must be then reconditioned and installed for a different use or in a different location. Example of this is a door as a table, which I've done in my office. The remaining reused fixed items, walls, ceilings, etc., are covered by MR Credit 1.2, Building Reuse for non-structural items. The other group is finished material, which may serve their original function but have undergone refurbishment. Great example of a door as a table in that image, and also reuse salvage hardware from Hippo Hardware in Portland in the image below. In the calculations, you must first determine the total material costs. If you can't get actual costs, you can use default option, which is 45% of total construction costs. But this is pretty high, so I do recommend getting actual costs, and this is something that needs to be communicated in pre-bid packages and to the subs, that they will have to report their material costs and be transparent about that. It does include all costs to the project other than labor and equipment. You don't want to be getting more credit for contractors moving slowly and paying more. So the ideal is to use your actual material costs according to the CSI format schedule. Once again, calculating along the way throughout the submittal process, such as in your master submittal log with the calculator, is critical. That is what our GBIM software does. It's important to come up with your own method if you don't have a tool. So you want to determine the cost of each material either by actual cost or replacement value. And the replacement value can be determined by pricing a comparable material in the market. As a review, provide total material costs. It's a hard cost from CSI master format, less labor equipment, or default 45% value. And then provide tabulation of each salvage reused material, the description of the material, the source or vendor, and the product costs, less labor and equipment. And provide a narrative describing the material's reuse strategy. This helps the reviewers understand how the material was reused. Benefits include reduced costs, depending on the complexity of refurbishing. They're often more durable in how things used to be built. Local demolition companies can sell materials recovered from existing buildings to avoid landfill tipping fees. Once again, a synergy with construction waste management. In some areas and municipalities and waste management companies have established facilities to sell salvaged building materials at landfill sites. Related credits include building reuse, construction waste management, recycled materials, regional materials if it's used on site. For calculations in the material and resource category, there are multiple credits can be affected by the total material cost calculation. So it's important to understand this 45% material default value. So it's 45% of the total construction costs. This can be used for preliminary calculations before you know the total costs of the materials. So I do recommend that as the submittals are coming in, you actually do record actual costs and are constantly calculating the aggregate total of the percent of recycled material, or salvage material, or rapidly renewable based on cost of each material coming in with the CSI divisions 3 through 10. But this is very good to use as a preliminary calculation to give the team an idea of how difficult the commitment is going to be to meet those percentage goals of their total material costs. For example, a project that has a $10 million budget, the 45% default material cost equals $4.5 million. So 10% of that cost to earn 2 points for this credit would equal $450,000 spent on reused materials. It's important to understand that only the percentage of the material that is reused or recycled counts towards the total. So if you spend $10,000 on a material and only 10% of it is recycled content, let's say, then only $1,000 counts towards the total. So that's important to keep in mind, actually looking at the specs and not just buying into greenwashing that says this has recycled content in it and it turns out to only be 1%. That's not going to contribute much to your goals. So make sure you're really dealing with your vendor and manufacturer to pick the best option.